part un. After driving 5 hours to a family reunion in a place I paid, I didn't see anyone there. Then, I received a text message. Did you think we were really coming? You are total failure. I regret creating you 25 years ago, Dad wrote. I laughed, and the next day I came to him with the tax service and his face. After my grandmother died, everything fell apart. Things weren't perfect before that, but we held it together. My parents, my little brother Chris, and me. We had birthdays, holidays, some bad years, and some good years. But when she died, something in my parents cracked wide open, and they didn't even try to hide who they were anymore. She was the only person in the family who really understood me. When I moved out after college, she was the one I kept in touch with the most. She'd call every Sunday, send cards for random things, slipped me cash when I was struggling. She always said I reminded her of herself, and maybe that's why she left what she did. She left me more than my parents. Not millions or anything like that, but enough to make a difference. Enough to drive my parents crazy. I didn't flaunt it. I didn't argue, but I didn't offer to share it with them either. That's when they turned on me completely. The calls stopped. The texts went cold, then stopped altogether. When I tried to talk about it, they said I was manipulating them, taking advantage of their kindness. They said a lot of things that I won't repeat. Maybe I expected this from my father. He's always been the kind of guy who sees people as transactions. But my mom, she didn't even hesitate. She took his side like it was the most natural thing in the world. The last thing she said to me before she cut off contact was that I needed to do some serious thinking about what kind of son I was. Chris was the only one who didn't turn away. He's 20, still living at home, stuck in that weird place where you want to grow up but can't afford to. He kept reaching out, called, texted, even drove out to see me a couple of times. Never asked for anything, just wanted to hang out, play video games, talk about music. He never brought up the money or the drama unless I did. A few months ago, he started hinting that Mom and Dad felt guilty, that they miss me. I didn't buy it. I told him I was over it, and for the most part I was. But then he started pushing a little harder. Said they were ready to make peace, that they realized they had gone too far. He said he was tired of playing the middle, tired of pretending we were still some kind of family. I gave it some time. Thought about it more than I should have. Then last week, I decided it might be worth another try. I told Chris I'd pay for dinner. A nice one. All of us. Neutral ground. Nothing fancy. Just a chance to sit down and talk like adults. He was excited. Said he talked to them. Said they agreed. So, I booked the place. Not cheap, but worth it if it meant a fresh start. I put the reservation in my name. 5 people, 7 p.m., Saturday night. Then I made the 5-hour drive to their town. No fanfare, no expectations. I just hoped they'd show up and give it a try. I got there a little early. I told the hostess my name. She smiled and showed me to a table. I sat down, ordered a water, waited. 15 minutes passed. Then 30. No sign of them. Chris's phone was off. That was odd. He never turns it off. I began to wonder if something had happened. Then my phone buzzed. A message from my dad. Did you really think we were coming? You're a complete loser. I regret creating you 25 years ago. No punctuation. All caps. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't even feel sad, just numb. And then, for some reason, I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so petty, so completely absurd, that I couldn't believe I just wasted all this time and money on it. I didn't finish my water. I got up and walked out and found a hotel a few blocks away. I wasn't going home. Not yet. I wasn't done. I didn't go home. I wasn't even thinking about it. After everything that had happened in the restaurant, I knew that something inside me had snapped, but not in a dramatic, yelling in the street kind of way. It was calm, focused, cold. I lay in the hotel bed staring at the ceiling most of the night. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I just thought about how carefully they planned it, how they knew exactly what they were doing. Taking Chris's phone. That was deliberate. Waiting until the last second to disappear. That was too. That wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a move. One they expected me to crawl away from again, like always. But this time, they made it personal. They involved Chris, and they made sure it hurt. I opened my laptop around 5 a.m., my mind already circling the idea that had been in the back of my mind for years, something I never thought I'd act on, not because I was afraid, but because I thought I was better than that. But if you push someone far enough, they start to wonder what being better ever got them. My dad's accounting business looks small from the outside. Just a little place with a rusty sign on the side of the garage and a website that hasn't been updated since 2011. But what most people don't know is that he's been making real money from it for years, and not always legally. He used to brag about it when I was younger. Mostly when he'd had too much to drink, or was in one of his cocky moods. He did taxes for a bunch of cash-only businesses, nail salons, auto body shops. My dad's accounting business looked small from the outside. Just a little place with a rusty sign on the side of the garage and a website that hasn't been updated since 2011. But what most people don't know is that he's been making real money from it for years, and not always legally. He used to brag about it when I was younger, mostly when he'd had too much to drink or was in one of his cocky moods. He did taxes for a bunch of cash-only businesses, nail salons, auto body shops, a couple of sketchy rental property guys. Some of it was legal, some of it very much wasn't. There were double-entry books, fake deductions, phantom dependents, cash that was never reported. He pocketed extra money from his clients for handling the risk. He called it smart business. Grandma never knew. Mom pretended she didn't. I was the one who helped him clean up after a power surge years ago. He thought all his data was gone, but I found a way to recover most of it and back it up. I saved everything. Old invoices, tax returns, spreadsheets, client lists, to a separate drive. At the time, I just thought I was being helpful. I never told him I kept a copy. But now it felt like a loaded gun I didn't know I was carrying. The drive was still in my backpack. I plugged it in, opened the folders one by one, and saw everything exactly where I left it. I checked names, dates, amounts. There were a few files that even I didn't fully understand, but enough that anyone in law enforcement would, especially those with obvious discrepancies between income statements and IRS filings. I didn't rush. I wanted to be thorough. I spent most of the day in a nearby coffee shop, headphones on, sorting and organizing the files. I printed some things out. I highlighted key parts. I knew what I was looking for. Patterns, client connections, the scope of what he'd done. By evening, I had a binder thick enough to make someone nervous. And not just my dad. Some of these clients had names I recognized. People who would not want this to come to light. People who would burn my dad alive if they thought he might take them down with him. I didn't go to the police. I didn't go to a lawyer. I contacted someone I hadn't spoken to in 4 years, Melissa. She works for the IRS in the Field Investigation Division. We dated briefly in college, kept it friendly after that. I told her I had something she'd like to see. She didn't take me seriously at first, until I mentioned 3 names and a number. Then her voice changed. She asked me to meet her the next morning. That night, I got a text message from a number I didn't recognize. It was Chris. "Hey, they took my phone Saturday. Just got it back. Where are you?" I gave him the name of my hotel. He called right away. He sounded calm, confused. He said Mom and Dad told him I canceled dinner, that I changed my mind and wasn't coming. I didn't even say anything. I just sent him a screenshot of the message Dad had sent me. There was silence on the other end of the line for a while, then just one sentence. I didn't know. I told him I believed him. He asked what I was still doing in the city. I said, tending to some family business. I didn't tell him what I was doing. Not yet. The next morning felt like the first real day of my life. I put on a plain black hoodie, grabbed the binder I put together, and took the elevator down to the lobby. On the way to the IRS field office, my phone buzzed a few times from familiar numbers. I ignored them. I had a 9:30 meeting. I arrived at 9:10. Melissa looked just the same. Buttoned up, serious face, the kind of person who wouldn't even blink if you dropped a bomb in front of her. She silently flipped through the first few pages of the folder. Her finger stopped on a number, then another. She looked up right into my eyes and just nodded once. "Can you leave this with me?" I told her that I could leave copies. The originals stayed with me. 2 hours later, she called. I was sitting in the hotel room, half watching a cooking show and wondering what Chris was thinking. She wasted no time. "We're starting an investigation. I need you to come with me." I thought she meant back to the office. I was wrong. She meant to my parents' house. I was in a black government sedan with tinted windows. There were 3 others in the car, all quiet, dressed in business casual, but with that unmistakable "don't mess with me" attitude. Another car followed. We weren't using sirens, but it still felt somehow loud, like the whole town should be watching. We arrived at the house around noon. Their house hadn't changed since I was a kid. Same cracked driveway, same faded green trim. For a second, something almost nostalgic crept in. Then the front door opened. My dad was standing there in his socks holding a sandwich. It was surreal. He saw me first, then the other people getting out of the cars behind me. I wish I had a picture of his face at that moment. The way the color just drained out of him, as if someone had pulled the plug. Melissa walked past me and up the stairs without hesitation. She flashed a badge, said a few quick words that I didn't catch. 2 of the other agents followed her inside. My dad said something like, "This must be a mistake," and then something about a warrant, but she cut him off. I stayed outside with one of the agents. I didn't have to go in. I didn't want to. Chris came out about 10 minutes later. He saw me and just stopped. His eyes started between me and the cars and the agents, and then back to me. I nodded once. That was all. He walked over slowly. "They said it was Dad's business. Fraud or something?" I didn't answer. "Was it you?" I said, "You shouldn't have gotten involved in their games." He didn't speak after that. He just sat down on the curb next to me. Some of the neighbors had started looking out their windows. A woman across the street was filming on her cell phone. A truck honked as it drove by, the driver slowing down to stare. It was starting to feel real. Then we heard screaming inside, loud, muffled, then silence. And a minute later, Melissa came back out, followed by one of the agents with 2 laptops and a thick binder that I recognized from Dad's office. I saw my mother in the window. She didn't come out. My dad walked out with someone beside him, talking fast, gesturing. His sandwich was gone. So was that smug look I'd seen on his face at least 1,000 times growing up. When he saw me standing next to Chris, he stopped cold. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Pale as snow, mouth half open. I didn't say a word. Neither did he. Melissa said, "This is just the beginning. He hasn't been arrested yet, but he knows what it means." I nodded. He knows. As the cars pulled away, Chris looked at me and said, "What happens now?" I told him. Now they know what it feels like to lose everything. And that was just the beginning. I kept waiting for things to settle down, like maybe someone would tap me on the shoulder and say, "All right, show's over. Back to real life." But no one did. Instead, each day seemed to dig the hole deeper. The day after the first raid, I got a call from Melissa. She sounded both amused and slightly overwhelmed. "They found a lot more than we expected," she said. Apparently, my dad had turned the house into a low-budget crime scene over the years. Not only did they find unfiled tax documents hidden behind fake insulation in the garage, yes, really, but they also found dozens of fake client folders with different versions of the same people's tax returns. Multiple identities. Multiple claims. He'd been playing a numbers game, creating fake dependents and recycling them with slight variations. One guy, named Brian Miller, had apparently claimed the same disabled cousin 3 years in a row under 3 different names. And it wasn't even his cousin. It was some random guy on Facebook that my dad found because he looked harmless. The real kicker was the couch. Not between the cushions. Not some folded 20s. No, they found actual envelopes, stuffed with rubber-banded stacks of bills inside the couch, hidden in a slit under the frame, wrapped in old grocery bags and duct tape. Who does this anyway? My dad, apparently. Almost $40,000 in cash. When I heard that, I just blinked and said, was he preparing for the apocalypse or just planning to fake his death and run? Melissa laughed and said, really? We're still trying to figure that out. And the cherry on top, an old locked file cabinet in the shed that he'd forgotten about, with a spare key taped to the back. Inside, handwritten notes with tax tricks labeled as if it were a middle school science project. One section was literally titled, "If They Ask." I'm not making this up. The IRS agents photographed everything. When they showed him the evidence, he apparently tried to act confused. He kept saying things like, "That's not mine," and "I don't remember that," which made Melissa almost lose it when she told me later. I swear, she said, he looked like a guy who just woke up from a coma in someone else's life. I said, that's how he looked the day Mom told him she was keeping me, 25 years ago. Same exact look. Chris laughed harder than I'd seen him laugh in months. But the laughter stopped as the numbers came in. It started with $130,000. That was just the basic unpaid taxes from over 10 years. But then came the penalties, the fraud flags, the under-the-table income estimates, the late fees, the interest, and a few other terms that sounded made up, but were apparently very real. The final total: $431,880.73. And that was just the beginning. There were still ongoing audits tied to the companies he'd worked with. If any of them decided to flip on him to save their own skins, and some already had, he could be on the hook for even more. One guy, a car wash owner named Felix, had already provided signed statements saying my dad had made adjustments without permission. Melissa said the words criminal charges were now being bandied about in closed-door conversations. That night, after all the calls and reports, and a second interview with a federal agent, I got a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk." It was my dad. No insults, no all-caps rants, just that. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't answer. I didn't block him. Not yet. Because if he wanted to talk, I wanted him to really understand who he tried to break. I wanted to see if he could look me in the eye and still act like he had power over me. I wanted to know what it felt like for him now, that everything he built was crumbling, and I was still standing, still calm, still standing, and very much not finished. The drive to their house felt like the end of something, like the credits should have started rolling the second we pulled onto their street. Chris didn't speak. He just watched the same houses go by. Hoodie pulled low, hands clutching his backpack, like someone waiting for turbulence to pass. I didn't push him. The weight of the week was heavy enough. When we got to the house, it looked different somehow. Smaller. Dimmer. The blinds were drawn as if to keep the world out. The same wind chimes hung by the front door, tinkling softly as if nothing had changed. But everything had. "I'll be quick," Chris said. I nodded. He didn't ask me to come in, and I didn't offer. Some things a man has to do without a witness. I waited outside for a while. 10 minutes, then 20, then 30. I could feel the tension in my chest grow the longer he stayed in there. I wasn't afraid anything would happen. Not like this. I just imagined the conversations, the guilt, the despair, the way they'd probably turn everything inside out to try to get him to stay. But he didn't come back crying. He didn't come back angry. He came back looking older. 2 suitcases, a duffel bag, his guitar. I helped him load them into the car without saying anything. As we drove away from the house, he didn't even look back. We stopped at a gas station just outside of town. I was pumping gas when he came out with 2 sodas, a candy bar, and a cheap disposable camera, I looked at him, and he just shrugged. Thought I might want to remember this someday. Not the bad parts, just how it felt to leave. Back in the car, he finally told me what happened in there. They didn't yell. They didn't fight, Mom cried. Dad didn't say much, just stared at the wall most of the time. He paused. She said she didn't know how they got here, that it's like she woke up and everything was destroyed. I waited. Then she asked if you were serious about never coming back. I asked what he told her. I said yes, that you were dead serious. He took a deep breath. I don't think she knows who you are anymore. She never did, I said. We got to my place a little after 8. I hadn't been home in a week. The air smelled different, like clean sheets and old books. Chris carried his stuff in slowly, looking around as if he didn't know where to stand. I gave him the guest room. It wasn't big, but it had space. A bed, a window, a closet, and most importantly, distance from all that noise. While he unpacked, I went back to the hotel to get the rest of my stuff. The guy at the desk asked me if everything went well. I told him it went like it should have, and left it at that. Back at the house, we ate microwave leftovers and watched something stupid on TV. Chris didn't say much. Neither did I. It was enough just to be there, away from it all. Around midnight, he stood in the kitchen drinking water, leaning against the counter. Do you think they'll fix anything? I shook my head. They can't fix what they don't know. He looked down at the glass in his hands. You always said we had to stay together no matter what. Yeah, I said. That was before they found out I wouldn't stay quiet. He laughed softly. They really blew everything up, I said. They lit the match. I just stopped putting out the fire. He didn't ask any more questions that night. He was home now, not just in my house, but away from theirs, from their mess. And that mess, it was theirs now. For once, we weren't a part of it. Update 1. It's been 2 weeks since the day the IRS knocked on my parents' door. And the fallout has been everything I expected, and a little more. Chris and I have settled into a rhythm. He's sleeping better, eating like a normal person again, even got a job at this tiny music store that looks like it hasn't been cleaned since the 90s, but somehow sells vintage guitars at full price. He comes home smelling of dust and guitar polish. And honestly, I think he likes it. He says the owner lets him play whatever he wants when no one's around. I think it's the first time he's felt useful in a long time. We don't talk much about our parents unless we have to, and last week we had to. Melissa called me late on Thursday. Not late, but at the hour when most calls are either a mistake or bad news. Her voice was straight to the point. No fluff. They're finalizing the charges. It's big. The investigation had wrapped up faster than anyone had expected. They'd been chasing a handful of suspicious tax cases for years, but they didn't have the connective tissue to tie it all together until my drive landed in their hands. That was when everything started to fall into place. It turned out that my dad's little operation had touched a lot more than his own bank account. Some of the clients whose returns he had fixed were now on the radar. Most didn't even know he'd claimed fake dependents under their names or used their businesses to claim dubious deductions. The ones who found out first were already turning on him. One guy, an HVAC contractor, showed up at the IRS office with a handwritten statement and a box of donuts, practically begging to be let off the hook. The IRS wasn't going to arrest my dad. Not yet, anyway. What's more likely is financial ruin. The fines were mounting. Civil penalties, back taxes, fraud adjustments. It was all piling up like a game of financial Jenga. Melissa said the total estimate was now somewhere between $580,000 and $640,000. Best case scenario, she said. He loses everything and walks away owing money for the next 15 years. And then she dropped something that made me blink. There's also talk of a federal lien on your mother's name. That caught me off guard. I hadn't thought about her getting that directly involved. She signed off on some of the returns as a secondary account holder. Melissa explained, we're still figuring out if she understood what she was signing. Chris didn't know that part until I told him. He got quiet, then said he wasn't surprised. They always did everything together, especially the shady stuff. A few days later, Chris scrolled past one of my mom's Facebook posts. Another old photo. This one was from an amusement park trip when I was maybe 11. We were all smiling in matching shirts. The caption read, "We built a life of love and hard work, praying for peace these days." He showed it to me without saying anything. I looked at the screen and said, "Love and hard work, huh?" Chris said, "At least she's praying." We both laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was crazy. The unexpected part came when I checked my mail the next morning and found a letter from a lawyer. Not mine, theirs. Inside was a polite, lawyerly request. Would I be open to talking about a private family matter, possibly through mediation? I read it 3 times before laughing so hard I almost dropped my coffee. I didn't respond. I won't. They made their bed. They set it on fire. Now they have to sleep in the ashes. Update 2. 1 week later, and somehow the dust still hadn't settled. If anything, it was getting thicker. Chris got a message from our mom last night. Not a phone call. Not even a proper text. Just a long-winded, typo-filled note on Facebook Messenger. She said she still believed family could heal, and that Chris should come home for a few days just to see the truth. He showed it to me without saying anything. I could tell it was shaking him a little. Not because he wanted to go, but because deep down, he was still hoping that some part of them would turn around and act like real parents. I told him what I always tell him now. "You're not going back into a burning house just because they put flowers in the window." He didn't answer. He just put his phone down and stared at the wall for a while. The IRS hadn't slowed down. Melissa filled me in again, this time more off the record. Apparently, the feds had found 2 more related bank accounts, both in my dad's name, but neither listed on any of his records. One of them was being used to transfer small amounts every few months to a savings account in my mother's maiden name. When they confronted her about it, she said she had forgotten it existed. They didn't believe her. And here's where it got even more surreal. One of the names on the fake dependents wasn't made up. It was a real person. A woman in Florida with no connection to our family who had been flagged during an audit of her own return because someone had claimed she lived at our address 3 years earlier. When the IRS called her, she said she'd never heard of my dad. She'd never been to our state. Turns out he'd gotten her name from a client's cousin's cousin or something. Equally convoluted. Just close enough to fly under the radar. Only now the radar was way up. Chris and I took a walk that night just to get out of the house. It was cold and quiet, and we passed a kid walking his dog who said hi like nothing was wrong. And for a second, it felt like none of it was real. Like we were just 2 brothers talking about music, or movies, or whatever people talk about when their lives haven't turned into illegal drama. Then Chris asked me, "Do you think they ever thought this would all catch up to them?" I thought about it. I don't think they thought about anything but what they could get away with. He nodded slowly. "It's funny. They always talked about responsibility, about being honest." "Yeah," I said. "They were really good at talking." We passed the diner with the lights still on. Chris pointed to it. "Let's eat." And so we did. Burgers and coffee at midnight, as if the world hadn't turned upside down. Because somehow, in the middle of it all, life just goes on. And that might be the strangest thing of all.